What I like about the conference is the way that it's organized. It's essentially Chatham House rules for industry delegates. It's industry delegates who give many of the presentations. So it's not like with other conferences where it's essentially an advertorial. Of course, for us as a law firm, it's interesting because we read or we reach a potential audience and potential clients through this as a medium. But what I think the delegates, the industry delegates, like most is they talk to each other. They have an opportunity to exchange views, to talk about problems, how they tackle them in their daily practices, in an environment that enhances that, but also because there are no other consultants, regulators in the room, they feel at liberty to talk to each other. So, and I think that just provokes thought, and that's why people keep coming back to these events. I thought it was a very interesting presentation by Nigel Griffin on additive manufacturing, which is of course something that it's a production trend, and it creates all kinds of questions around trade compliance, which I think are fun because they're new, there's new technologies, but it's also something that many companies grapple with. I thought that was quite an eye-opener, and particularly because he explained it from the perspective of a very large industrial player, GE. I thought that was a very interesting presentation. Well, I think there's lots of things happening in the US regulatory and policy landscape, and things are happening by not happening. And I think what Kevin was saying was that a lot of things that we now see coming out, policy changes, regulations, are essentially the result of something the prior US government already was preparing. I think his other point was that there's a particular shift, very much, of course, in the White House towards foreign policy, how to deal with countries like Iran, Russia, and that shift translates in changing of policies, although, oddly enough, in many of the US federal agencies involved, the leadership positions have not been filled in. Yeah. And what I thought was a bit of an eye-opener were the rules on rulemaking, i.e. you cannot introduce a new policy or a new explanation without scrapping another regulation or two regulations first. How that actually puts a spell on the US government giving guidance that's helpful to industry. I think, another point is clearly what we discussed, and that's where we got, I think, a lot of interaction with the audience as well, is how the US seems to be going this direction on things like the Iran nuclear deal, Iran sanctions, Russia, etc., whereas Europe seems to be steering in a completely different direction. I think that is something what we'll probably see continue to happen. I was looking at the official journal this morning because I was hoping to see the EU blocking rules for Iran being published. There was a press release, but no new regulations yet. So, but the blocks are drifting apart more and more and more. And then, of course, there's the trade war behind that on tariffs, which I think is now slowly starting to develop into a major conflict as well. I don't think that there's going to be a real change on the US side. I think, Europe's disadvantage is that it's very divided on things like, for example, Russia. There's a lot of division between the 28 European countries, less so where it comes to Iran. But then again, and I think that's what businesses are grappling with, the US financial system is embedded in all dollar business. So it's so very difficult for a large multinational company to legitimately do business in Iran and not involving US banks. Because it may be that, for another part of your business, you rely on financing from those banks. So I think, essentially, the US stepping out of the nuclear deal will be a major theme also in Europe's continued business relationship with Iran. We saw PSA, Peugeot pulling out of Iran. We've seen Total pulling out of Iran. And I think, frankly, there's little that the EU, by way of policy, can do about that. So I think, like you said, world's drifting apart. That's going to continue to happen for quite some time.